What's up, guys? So the other day I was thinking about what to do for the next video, and it was actually raining quite hard, and it had been for a couple days, and that's why I decided to go ahead and do this video today about what to do for door sales when you have bad weather. Now here I live down near Galveston, and it rains constantly. Whenever I was working in door sales, there'd be tons of days where it was just storming like crazy. And since door sales is so heavily involved on going out and knocking on doors, there would be a lot of times where I wasn't always sure what the right thing to do in that particular situation to be able to maximize my sales. So if you haven't checked out my previous door sales video, I'll put a couple of links somewhere up here. And go check those out. They're great videos. They'll help teach you the basics about what to do in door-to-door sales if you've just recently got this position. So go check those out. I hope they'll help you out. Whenever I worked a door-to-door sales position, whenever the weather would get really bad, a lot of the reps, myself included, would just not want to work that day. I mean, it's pouring down rain, there's lightning, there's a lot of areas that flood. And if I'm driving all over the downtown Houston area in a car, then there's a good chance that I could run into floodwaters. So I didn't always know what to do. So this is my list of 3 simple tips of things that you can do on days when the weather's just not in your favor. And I know if you're currently working in a door sales position, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, be honest, how many of you use the weather as an excuse to your boss or company to not do work that day? I mean, comment below. You have to have common sense, obviously. You shouldn't go driving around in floodwaters. You should constantly be checking the Weather Channel, look for updates, check your routes, know which areas are prone to flooding and which areas are safer. And if you have to, just work closer from home. I mean, there's actually a lot of things that you can do from home. But what I like to do to try to maximize my efforts in making sales that day is the first tip, which is to go to an area that's already produced some previous sales. So if you work this job, at least for a few months, then you probably have an idea of a couple of areas that you might be able to pick from that you've probably made a sale or two or a few sales before out of already. And if you haven't just completely worked the crap out of that neighborhood, then that's something that I would recommend doing. That's what I would do, is I would pick an area that either was an area that I had worked previously that had already yielded some sales that maybe I haven't hit in a while, and I would go to that area. Or I would go to another area that seems to have been producing sales recently and go work that area. Either one of those would work. Obviously, keep that in mind. You're going to want to weigh on flooding or icy roads, or depending on whatever your weather condition is where you are, just bear in mind the conditions of those areas to make your decision. So once you've made your decision on where to go, I would actually, even if the weather's actively bad, as long as it's not too bad to drive in or get to that area, I would go out to that area, park somewhere close to where I would want to actually start knocking doors, and wait for the weather to improve. So when the weather improves, you can actually use the weather to your advantage. Now, I understand a lot of companies, you're probably using some type of iPad or phone. You might have some paper still, depending on what company you're for, to keep a tally on information, keeping notes, and all that stuff. I understand if it's raining, it's really hard to use either of those. If it's an iPad, the screen's smearing. If it's paper, obviously it's gonna get wet and ruin, the ink's gonna smudge. I mean, you can't really do anything there. But if the weather improves just enough to go out, I usually try to do 10 door stretches. So what I mean by that is I'll go knock 10 doors and then turn around and then knock the other side of the street 10 doors. And then I would relocate to the next area that I would want to do within that group. And if you do this and break it up, you can kind of help, if it does come down really hard all of a sudden, then your vehicle's only 10 doors away at the farthest, so you don't have to worry about getting soaking wet. Obviously, you should always make sure you prepare proper rain gear. I mean, I always kept it on my person in my vehicle at all times, so I was always prepared for whatever weather might come up. Another good thing you can take advantage of is if this area if you've already worked it previously and you've made contact with a few people and maybe you have it on your notes that maybe they seemed like they were on the fence and you felt pretty positive about that particular person before, maybe there was some type of obstacle at the time that you couldn't overcome, maybe you have some new type of promotion, or maybe it's been long enough that if it's a contract issue, maybe they're out of their contract now, go back and talk with those people. That's probably, if you want to really be efficient, I mean, just drive up to that door and just hit those houses. So if you go back to those houses that you've already made contact, one, you already have your foot in somewhat where the person's already familiar with you. You probably, if it's someone that you feel was on the fence, then you probably already had gone into it with them a decent amount. And it's a good possibility that you'll have a smooth conversation. So that might be actually somewhere you would even want to start your day out, just to kind of get some positive momentum going, and maybe even start the day off with a sale. Another great thing you can do is, in any of those situations, you can actually use the weather to your advantage to be able to come inside. So if it's raining out, if it's cold, if it's really hot out, if you've already started a conversation with your prospect, then just ask, hey, the weather's really bad outside, or hey, it's raining really hard. Do you mind if we take this conversation inside? And there's a couple of good things for this. So obviously it gets you out of the poor weather. It puts you both in a more comfortable, relaxed position. And there's a statistic that I'll see if I can look up, and I'll post on the screen if I can find it. But it says that 75% of sales are actually closed inside the house. So sometimes you can actually use the weather to your advantage. And, I mean, a lot of people are afraid to ask to come inside the house, but I mean, if you've already struck up a kind of friendly conversation with them, especially if you've previously made contact with them, it doesn't hurt to ask. If they say no, then, I mean, no harm, no foul. Just keep rolling with what you've already got. But if they say yes, then the chances of you being able to actually make the sale increase significantly if you can get them to a point where they feel more comfortable and relaxed. And what better place for them to do that than in their own home? And I know personally that I've had a lot more sales closed when I was sitting down and talking with the homeowner inside their home, usually at their dining room table, than I have just outside talking with them. It can really help your chances out a lot if you are able to utilize that. And make sure, while you're inside the house, make sure to ask them to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Now, when the weather hasn't let up yet and you might find yourself stuck in your car, there's absolutely a few things that you can do. That brings us to tip number 2, which is do your follow-ups and callbacks. So what I would do is go through all of my previous contacts and look for the ones that I was only able to get an email from. I would type up a nice offer letter or email to send them a little bit of information on maybe some of our new promotions, just to touch base with them. And it really depends on how long ago you contacted them, how close you felt that they were on the fence to actually buying from you. So if you felt that they were maybe close and maybe they had some type of obstacle that you couldn't overcome at the time, maybe send them some of the latest promotions that might actually be able to help them out. I noticed a lot of people, I would be really close to making a sale with them. Sometimes, unfortunately, it comes down to pricing, and the previous offers I had just couldn't quite get them to where they wanted. So if it's been a little while, make sure you've talked to them. I mean, hopefully you would have enough notes on each individual person, or in your memory, remember what conversations you had. I mean, I always rely 100% on my memory all the time because it's not always that great. So I make sure I write down proper notes at the time when I make contact, so when I do go back and do these, I'll have the right information that I can tailor each email to each potential client. And I would send all those out first. That would be the first thing I do while I'm sitting in my car. And after that, for the people that I have a phone number with, or maybe both, I would go through and call each one. And I would have, my notes pulled up about this person, or any other information, previous accounts, whatever, and call them and see if I can make contact that way and just talk to them. And if you can't get a hold of them by calling them, if you have an email, then I would go ahead and send that person an email. So the idea here is you're sending out a bunch of emails and you're just kind of putting your feelers out to see, and you might get a response later. There's plenty of times where I sent out some emails, made some calls, and I didn't hear anything back or get any answers or responses immediately. But later on that evening, I would often either get an email back or get a call back, and I would be able to make some type of sale. So it's a good idea that should be one of the things you try to do early on, or as early as possible, especially while you're not actually able to go out and knock doors, so you can maximize your efforts. And if you're doing this right, you should be able to move your vehicle to a high yield area or places that you've already previously made contact, and you might have a few people that you felt were on the fence, and just go back to those areas when the weather is favorable enough. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but maybe just favorable enough so you can go out and do like a stretch of 10 doors on both sides of the street at a time. Then you can take your vehicle, move it to the next set, and if the weather turns bad, then when you go back to your car, you can send out some emails, put some calls in, and if you can't get anything right there, if the weather clears up again, then you can maybe go out and hit some more doors while you're maybe waiting for a response from your email. If you've done all of these and the weather still doesn't seem to be improving, and maybe even it seems like it's getting worse, and you feel like you might be running out of time in the day, the third thing on this list is look on how you can improve your skills. Sometimes on rainy days, I would try to work closer to home just because if weather situation turned out poorly, I didn't want to be caught in a flood. So if you are working closer to your home or working partially from home, then if I've already covered all of my bases, then I would try to improve myself. So if there's extra time that I would normally have spent knocking doors, I would now invest that time instead into improving my skills. At this point, you can do stuff like watching more of my YouTube videos and smashing that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Or you can read, there's a ton of sales books out there that you can read and improve your skills. So there's a couple of great books you can read. One of them is by Robert Cialdini called Influence, and I'll put the links to all of these in the description below. And what this book goes over is persuasion and how to communicate effectively to people. And in sales, this is probably one of the biggest things, is learning how to properly communicate. The other is called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So if you have extra time, I strongly encourage reading these books. I think they helped me, and I really feel they'll help you improve your own skills. The other things you can do to improve your skills when the weather's not in your favor, other than reading books, watching YouTube videos like this, smashing the like button, are rehearsing. So if you've been doing it long enough, you should have a pretty standard sales pitch. And a lot of people in the beginning seem to be pretty opposed to having a generic sales pitch, but it's actually really, really important. And I know if you're first out of the academy and you start using some of the generic sales pitches that they taught you in the academy, then you might come off sounding robotic in the beginning. So I understand. But when you are able to open up, become more fluid and calm when you're using this pitch, it can absolutely be a crucial tool to have. So what I would do is I would try different pitches. I would have a standard set of pitches, and I would try different ones at the door. Sometimes things that I learned from some of the books I read, YouTube videos I watched, or things that I learned in the academy. And I would go out and try these pitches. And the ones that seemed to work the best, I would really pull all of my knowledge together and think about what would really help improve this. And I would go ahead and try to tweak the pitch as best as I could. And when I felt that it was almost perfect, I would just rehearse it in my head. And I would just repeat it over in my head. And I would reread it over and over and over again to the point where I was able to have the whole thing memorized and regurgitate in a mirror without having it in front of me. And I just continued doing that until it just felt natural and I just remembered the entire thing. At first, when you start using it, you might come off a little robotic sounding, but the next time that you have an opportunity to go knock doors, just start employing that immediately. Whenever you do this, you start to develop not only confidence, but you start sounding a lot more professional, and it makes you sound a lot more authoritative on the subject. And people prefer to buy from people that know what they're talking about, or at least sound like they know what they're talking about. And I'm not saying you should just make stuff up that sounds good. Obviously, that's not going to work in the end. If you're able to get to a point where you sound really well and not just rehearsed, then this can actually be a very effective tool at the door. So I think it's really important to do all of these when the weather's not really in your favor and sometimes you just don't know what to do. These are some of the things that I found myself doing that I found very effective whenever I couldn't go out and just knock doors all day. So if you made it this far and you haven't already, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe, hit the little notification bell so you can be notified when I upload future content just like this one. As well, make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and the links to those will be down in the description below. So I really hope this was able to help somebody out today. I would definitely try to work on these. I mean, always try to improve yourself. That's the number one thing, is always try to improve yourself, improve your skills. There's always something that you can do, even on days that you can't do your normal schedule. So that's it for today, guys. I really hope these helped you out.